would you say would be like some early obstacles? I mean, obviously you have the background in surfing, so you understand the ocean. Um, what would you say would be like early obstacles you had diving, like clearing or just trying to like find people to
Yeah,
dive with was a big one for me.
yeah. I didn't even realize that I had some sort of problem with dairy, but I did. So clearing was difficult for me when I first started diving, and I dove a lot. Like I would dive every day, like
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and then I noticed every time I was diving, God, I had all this congestion and stuff that would be in my mask. And then all of a sudden, after diving a bunch of consecutive days, like maybe more than a month of consecutive days of diving, and I just noticed there wasn't as much of that phlegm and shit coming up. And then I started correlating. So I don't know if I have some sort of problem with dairy or if that's a normal thing for most people, but I cut dairy out completely, and then now like I don't have to touch my nose or anything. I can just clear. And I found that I think there's a lot. I don't know the science behind it, but I just know for me personally that when my sinuses were clear, I just didn't have to push so hard to clear, and
Yeah.
and it just diving to any kind of depth was easier. And I know people take Sudafed and things like that, but diet actually was one of the things that it kind of showed me that hey, this dairy's not helping you,
Right.
equalize and go to the places that you want to go to get a fish. And so anyway, that was one of the obstacles initially, and then yeah, there was just not a lot of people. I mean, we're talking about probably 1991, and there wasn't a lot of people that were diving.
Yeah.
So we would. There was a friend of mine, Chris Lind, who got super into diving at the same time, and so we used to do a lot of diving together. But I would go by myself too, and so it's amazing now to see what it's all blown up to. I mean,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so it's just yeah. That's as far as other obstacles. Well, the obstacles of like. The
Figure it
guns,
out.
the guns they sold just weren't worthy of the fish that we were trying to get.
Right.
So we had to make our own guns.
I think that's what led me to your house that day. I shot a
Yeah.
white sea bass with a 3-band, like, I don't know, a rail gun, and the shaft like went in about an inch.
It was
And
like
I was so
lucky.
crushed because I've been looking for those things for so long. And
Yeah.
then I went and got to it, and it just took
Ripped
off.
out. Yeah.
And then I asked you, I was talking to you at the fuel dock. That's another thing. You're on the Harbor Island fuel dock, so if
Yeah.
you need fuel, go there. I remember I was talking to you, you were like, come over and like, I'll
Yeah.
show you. Like, yeah.
Well, we made a lot of guns that didn't work,
Right.
and so anyway, where we ended up was I just started. They're a copy of the old attic guns, which are the guns that Wally Potts used to make. I just started putting more volume, which was the first gun I ever made, was an exact copy of what Wally made, and I used Wally Potts's mechanism
Yeah.
and his reels, and then we had to go get the spears made and the
Yeah.
tips, and so it was.
So you went over to Wally's house?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, we went over and bought. He would sell slide rings, and he would sell the mechanism, and then you design your gun. And I looked at what he had, and I was like, oh, that looks great. And so we made the guns as he had them, and I think at that time Bob Johnson was making the reels, and so we went up to his house up at Claremont Mesa, and there was just like this sort of little underground network that you had to know, or you were going to the store and buying some gun that wasn't really going to shoot much more than a calico,
Right.
And
Yeah.
so you kind of had to get into this little circle, and I just sort of fell into it, and then
How did you fall into it? Like, how did you meet the guys like Potts and um,
Bernard.
Jack? Yeah.
well, I was neighbors with Jack, but that was much later, but.
I
And
was
then,
here in Sunset.
yeah,
Close,
he lived over by Point Loma High School,
Oh, okay.
and I lived literally right across the street
Okay.
for 2.5 years or so,
Yeah.
and that was right when I was designing and trying to find the right gun and playing with different stuff, and so I'd go talk to him, and he would give because those guys really had done everything. I mean,
Yeah.
like I'd have some idea, and I would go over to their house and I say, hey, what do you think? And they'd be like, oh yeah, I've done that before. Let me show you how. And then they tell me how it worked out for them.
Yeah.
and so, but they had kind of different philosophies too, and so it was interesting to have both those guys to be able to talk to. But how I originally got into the circle of people was actually there was a guy, Cliff Sorensen from Solana Beach, who Wes Andrews. He was buddies with a guy named Wes Andrews, who was part of that old guard of spearfishing guys. You know,
Yeah.
not as old as Wally and Jack, but you know,
Yeah.
and there was just a small group of guys, and if you didn't get close to those guys by some stroke of luck or something, then you really didn't even kind of know what the hell was going on, you know.
Yeah.
And so I met Cliff, and he showed me this picture of this big black sea bass he'd speared, and I was like, holy crap! And then he showed me his gun. I'm like, oh man! And so that's how it. So then Cliff was like, oh, you're interested? He saw I was all fired up, and so then
How old were you at this time?
21.
Yeah.
You know, probably
Yeah.
20, 21.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hungry?
Yeah. Just somehow, you know, whatever, life just pulls you a certain way, and I was into it, and so I didn't even ask why why am I doing this or where the hell am I going? I just went, and anyway, so that's how I got into that little network of people, and then we started making guns, and we made a variety of different guns until we finally got to the model that basically you saw.
Yeah.
You know, where it's a bigger gun.
Yeah, I think it was like 2000, early 2000. It was probably 18, maybe more than that now. 18 years ago, I think, and I brought that gun home.
Yeah.
And my wife was like,
What
"What
the
the
hell's
hell
that?"
are you going to do with that? Shoot a whale?"
That's what everybody used to. Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, "But this thing shoots," and I used it on the trip last week in Baja. I was like, "This thing shoots so straight."
Yeah.
With a big enough shaft.
Yeah.
I know when I pull the trigger, I'm good.
Yeah.
Like if it's all up to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was the thing, is there's been times where I've had big fish go by, and there's just every spearfisherman knows what a sick feeling it is when you think of all the time and hours that you spend in the water, and then that big one comes by and you have the wrong equipment.
Yeah.
And so I thought, I'm not going to have the wrong equipment anymore.